Hello, everybody. Dr. Tony Hampton here, board certified family and obesity medicine doc here with my good friend Ken Armstrong, all the way from Ireland. Yes, there's a 6-hour difference, but we made it work out. And we're actually doing a repeat because our last performance required some changes in the audio. So we wanted to share an interaction that was clear for all of you guys to hear the wonderful transformation that Ken has undertaken. You'll learn a lot about Ken when you watch podcast episode number 20. Yes, I've had 20 podcasts. I'm so excited. That'll be released on November the 13th. Yes, that's Friday the 13th. But never, ever fear, because although Ken did share some stories of some of his failures, he also shared how there was some redemption with that. And he'll tell you how many pounds he lost. And it's really a story of a transformation. That's why I decided I wanted to do a YouTube video to share some of the images of Ken. So you'll see a before and after of Ken. So if you have a podcast app, make sure to check that out in your favorite podcast app, and or go to drtonyhampton.com. And I do have a link on my website where you can click on it and listen to the podcast on the website. So please make sure to do that. What I want Ken to do right now is to introduce himself, because I know all of you guys won't really look at the YouTube. The podcast. You won't listen to it. So I want him to introduce himself. So because I want him to tell his story. And while he's telling that story, I'll share my screen so that you can see some of the images that we're going to speak about. So Ken, my friend, thank you for some more of your precious time. I know you're in the middle of your day, and I'm just starting my day here in Chicago. But let's share some of your story of transformation so our audience will get to know you a little bit better.
Certainly. Thank you, Dr. Tony. I guess, as a young man, I was a sort of sports sort of guy. I wasn't that good. I was always a big sort of kid, but over the course of the years, I started to put on a few pounds here or there, and then I guess it really started to take off in terms of putting on the weight around 1999-ish. I left my job in retail and threw everything up in the air and decided to take on a role in hospitality. I was an owner and manager of bars and restaurants, and with one thing and another, I guess there's long days, short nights, bad food, alcohol, stress. I just put on the pounds, and I went from, say, when I joined the bar trade, I was 240 or 260, and ended up at 450 pounds, just through all of the above in terms of stress and poor sleep and poor food choices, late night drinking, late night eating, everything that just was completely wrong for me or for anybody really. So effectively, I got to this, and I suppose what I should say is that about 5 years before this journey for me started with weight loss, I lost my father to prostate cancer, which he was age 60, so he was a young man, and actually my mother said to me not that many years ago that stress probably played a part in that. He was a busy guy. He was a executive in a company, and I think it just got to him in the end. So I suppose him losing him in that circumstance. I was only 40 when he died at 60. So I think that was the catalyst for me to start thinking about my own health. And although I still put on more weight until, through the grieving process and everything like that, but at 2011, it just got to the point where I needed to do something about it. I was too big to buy clothes. was unfit, unhealthy. I was married by now, and to be honest, I probably wasn't that much use as a husband in the sense of not being able to do chores around the place, and because I just wasn't fit enough and healthy enough. So when we moved to Ireland in around that time, it gave me a new impetus. I left the pub trade. I took up the job that I'm doing now, which is a business analyst. But I suppose over the course of that time, it just gave me the opportunity to strip back some of the noise that was in my head around, the work and the stress and everything like that. So I think I was in a better place to do it. And then the further catalyst was I tried lots of things. I tried low fat. I tried vegetarian. I tried all sorts, shakes, soups, you name it, cabbage diet, everything. I tried it all, and it just didn't work for me. And then really the final throw of the dice was picking up a book at an airport, Why We Get Fat and What to Do About It by Gary Taubes, which is kind of a slimmed down version of his major piece of work at the time, which was Good Calories, Bad Calories. So I read this and I was like, wow, so this is all possible. And what I love about Gary and Amy Berger and Nina Teicholz is that because they're not medics, they're actually storytellers. And I think for somebody like me, but they also provide a lot of data. So for me, it worked really, really well that I could see the sense in it. It wasn't do this because you need to do it. This is just, okay, I can make sense of it now. So I started the journey of low carb, and I stopped drinking alcohol. I stopped the carbohydrates, processed foods, and literally I went on to meat, green veg, fish, cheese, and eggs, which is more or less, and cauliflower if you count that. So that was literally, and any combination of those was my. And over the 18 months from then, I managed to lose 175 pounds, which was an amazing achievement and a life-changing happening for me. All of a sudden I was fitter, I was healthier. I could buy clothes that I couldn't buy. I could go into a store and buy clothes off the shelf, and it was very emotional to be able to do that. But you know what? Once you've and this is and I guess this has happened to other people who've been on these types of massive life-changing things. You become very confident that you know what you're doing, and you become very confident in your own ability, and maybe just a bit cocky. And so I remember a Christmas around, I'm going to say 2013, or so it's about 2 years after a Christmas, and I just picked up a bit of, there was sweet stuff, cake or chocolate or something, which I hadn't touched for 2 years. And I just put it into my mouth, and the neural pathways, those reward pathways, just lit up. It was like, I can imagine it would be like if you were taking a hit of drugs for the first time, or cigarettes or something. There's this huge rush of adrenaline and rush of the neural pathways opening up, and this was. So my first mistake was taking the stuff in the first place. My second mistake was not stopping myself taking the second one. And I think Rob Sivers talks about that, in that you have to stop yourself the second time. And I didn't stop myself. And what happened it's almost as miraculous as the loss. I needed to feed those neural pathways. So I then had a bit more chocolate. Maybe I'd have some cookies the next day. Maybe I'd have some cake, because I'm okay. I've lost 175 pounds. Nothing can stop me now. But if we move on 18 months, I put 80 pounds of that back on.
Wow.
Just by being not focusing on the process and not keeping track of what I was doing. So kind of, and then of course, as it's going on, as you get to 40 pounds on, 50 pounds on, you think to yourself, well, I've blown it. So I can't be bothered to go again. I'm done. This is me. I'm a carbaholic. I'm a sugaraholic, and there's nothing I can do about it. So whilst that was a terrible, terrible time, I learned more from that experience than I did from the first experience of losing the weight, because I realized how fragile the balance is between success and failure. And I learned from that you fail, but the important thing about failing is, and everybody, like, I don't care who you are, if it's Thanksgiving and you want a cookie, you'll have a cookie. What you have to remember is not to have the second one and to get back on the horse. There's nothing you can do about yesterday.
That's right.
Nothing you can do about yesterday. Nothing you can do about that cookie you had an hour ago. What you can do now is move on from there. And I suppose, it took me a long time to realize that. It took a lot of hardship and a lot of pain and but in say 2018, I just had to do something about it. And so what I did is I went back to the source. I went back to Gary's book and reread it. And I also read another book around intermittent fasting. And what was really interesting, I started with an article actually that was about Muslim men during Ramadan, which was really interesting because at that point, as I'm sure your viewers are aware, Muslim men don't eat, they fast. They fast during the day, they fast during daylight. So they had good data on intermittent fasting. And of course, I looked at fasting as starving yourself. So, I thought, okay, I need to get back on the low carb. Let's do that. I did that. And then I kind of, over the course of the next few weeks, I bolted on. Well, actually, it happened by accident. I'm sure a lot of people will tell you this, is that when you start on a really strong, hardcore ketogenic diet, what happens is you actually don't get hungry anymore. And so what I was finding was I was going till 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock. And all of a sudden now I'm at a protocol where, I probably don't eat now until 4 or 5 in the evening from 8 or 9 the night before. So I'm doing probably something around 18 to 20 hours fasting. And, so what happened was with all the new fasting protocol, with going hardcore keto, I managed to not only take off that 80 pounds, but I took another 40 off from the original. So I'm now 240 so I'm now back to the weight I was when I left high school. And, I'm only now 15 pounds away from half what I was when I was at my biggest. So, I think the moral of this story is, don't blow it once you've done the work. Once you know the science works for you, once you know that low carb has worked for you, or whatever your chosen, intervention of choice, that's fine. But don't leave the process, because and if you do leave the process, go back to the center as soon as you can, regroup, find your North Star again, and move on.
All of those comments resonate with me. The first thing I want to say is I do agree that metabolic health may look different for everybody. I think for the majority of us, we need to do some carb restriction. That's everything I learned in my obesity training. There are people, however, who can do it through other types of diets, like vegetarian and other types of diet. In fact, I'll have Dr. Terry Mason on a future podcast, probably my next episode, and we're going to talk about his approach, which tends to be more vegetarian. I think for most of my patients, that's a struggle because they are either not willing to give up meat or simply it's such a big shift for them. So, but we do want to hear from Dr. Mason. I also want to comment on the fact that Dr. Joan Iflin is a great resource if you struggle, if you have a processed or sugar addiction. Dr. Joan Iflin's Reset Community, you can look that up, is a great resource. And I really appreciate having resources, because without those resources, people who struggle may not have the coaching they need to get through their struggle. So, but I do appreciate what you're also saying, which is you have to look inside yourself and sometimes just be willing to say, this is something I know that works, and we need to push ahead and make sure that we do those things. So before I knew I was going to talk to you, I had imagined, what this guy would look like if he was a larger guy. And I do encourage all of you guys, if you want to see yourself transform to a larger person or to a thinner person, the Face app, and they may have others, can simply do that with just a click of a button. So my brain said, well, maybe I could imagine what it's like to be larger. So I enlarged myself, and this is who I ended up looking like. And even as I look at this guy who is larger, I can not say that I understand the failures that Ken talked about, and what it feels like to go into a clothing store. And we talked a little bit more about that even during the podcast, and be excited that I can go into a normal clothing store. So this image, although it did show me larger, it did not truly prepare me for what it's like to be a larger person. But again, if you get that Face app, not only can you use this type of image to understand what it would be like, but if you're struggling with your weight and you're imagining what it would look like if you were thinner, well, guess what? The Face app, I think there's a little bit more of an upgrade to get to that feature, but it'll actually show you as a thinner person. And imagine taking that thinner image and putting that thinner image on a refrigerator or somewhere where you can see it as a little motivation. Sometimes our motivation is things like that. Sometimes it's trying to be healthy for the family or the grandkids. So, but let's look a little bit at a couple of images of Ken. And Ken, if you don't mind, tell me a little bit about this image.
This is quite a late one. This is in the summer this year. I guess I was. This is down at our local beach, where I walk most days. I mean, we're in a little bit of lockdown at the minute, so we can't do the walk on the beach. But that's our local beach. That T-shirt is a large, where I would have been wearing 5X large when I originally started. So that's the first thing I see is and that was by the way, just as an aside, that was we were in lockdown just after lockdown finished the first time round, and that's actually a homemade haircut because barbers weren't open. So I was doing it. That was a homemade. That's one of the first thing I see actually. But actually, what I see there is the T-shirt. The T-shirt being and also I would never have worn something like that.
Wow.
Even the one I have today is a similar type of style, which I never would have worn before, because the style isn't available in 5XL. By the way, most big guys. I can't speak for plus sizes in women, but most guys end up, it's certainly in Ireland and the UK, you can either buy them in black, or you have to be really buying sort of Hawaiian shirts, because they think we're either like that or we don't want to, or we hide away in our black gear. So that's the image I get with that.
Nice. And again, I want to reiterate, and I think those who struggle with their weight hear you loud and clear. But for those who don't struggle, imagine not being able to go to a normal clothing store. Imagine always nervous when you even go to the doctor's office because you're concerned about getting on the scale. You hope they even have a scale that can actually go past 350 pounds. I mean,
Yeah.
Kim was at 450 pounds. Imagine going to the airport and, as Ken talked about in the podcast, having to request the strap that'll be large enough, or worried about the person who sits next to you because you
Yeah.
respect people, but you also know you may take more than one seat. So it's really a lot of transformational things that happen, and I just want to, share that. What about the next image, Ken? Tell me a little bit about that one.
Yeah, that was actually highlighting that was a new shirt that I bought, which was large. That's something I never had the opportunity to wear. I always stayed away from nicer sort of colors and stuff. So that was taken a couple of weeks ago. I happened to, funnily enough, the reason I took that was that I was going to my car, and maybe it's vanity, I don't know, but by luck I just happened to, as I was unlocking the door of the car, I happened to see my image, and I didn't know who it was. I didn't recognize that fella at all. Where you look in a mirror and you see the mirror version of what you see, but I actually looked at the image, and it only caught it out the corner of my eye. And when I looked again, of course I knew, but when I looked at it, I went, "Who's that? Who's that?" And of course I realized it was me. And so, I was, and I think one of the things that I like about this is that I'm actually smiling. I'm actually, I felt good that day. And there were many days where I didn't feel good or would have hidden away. Actually looked, funnily enough, I was going through some photo albums, and there's hardly any pictures of me going back because I was so ashamed of the way I looked and the way I felt. And when you look at it now, it's tough. It's tough when you see that stuff.
And it's ironic because even people who are thinner will sometimes look in the mirror and not be satisfied. I think most of us find
Yeah,
something that's a flaw, but then you add that extra layer of being not at your ideal size,
yeah,
and that constant struggle. So not only
I
does
think
it,
I think it's missing. One of the things that's really missing, and I know it's certainly having some traction here now, is that body image for men is becoming much more of an issue than it was maybe years ago. Women have always had that struggle with body image, I think, and the expectation on them. But I think the expectation on men is much more now.
Mhm.
And it's interesting because if you think about it, most of the shots you see, this the other thing I was thinking about, that there's no filter there in that picture. So when you look at pictures of people in magazines, they're not real. Actually,
Right.
they're usually been airbrushed, or they've been sized, or you even saw it with the one you sized up. You could have
Yeah,
sized that down,
yeah,
and and so I think we have to be comfortable with ourselves, and that doesn't mean being really stick thin. I don't want to be stick thin. I don't really want to lose more than about 15 or maybe 20 pounds more, because then I'm comfortable in my skin. But that doesn't just come from the scales or from the pictures. It comes from your life. It comes from being happy, being grateful for the things that you do, which I wouldn't have been able to be when I was sugar fueled. I just wouldn't have been have that opportunity to even have that perspective or have that thought or be clouded by alcohol.
right.
This this is pure, unfiltered Ken, and that's actually what I like about that picture.
Wow. And I love it. I love all of your comments, and I do believe that, as you have suggested, it's really more about being healthy. So if being healthy for any particular person, like as a physician, when I talk about metabolic health, I'm talking about blood pressure, blood sugars, your lipids. So really the triglycerides, the HDL, which is a good cholesterol, and I'm talking about your waist circumference. So if those things are in the normal range, you're metabolically healthy. There's other things we can measure, of course, but if you're there, and you just happen to not be at this ideal body mass index, then Dr. Hampton is okay with that. Ken Armstrong, he's okay with that, because so everybody doesn't have to look like this model that they put out there in the media that's airbrushed. We just want to be the best version of ourselves. And I hope anybody listening to this understands the value of being the best version of yourself. Even as I've gotten older, I had to keep my hair cut lower because of my genetics. So I have to be comfortable with the way I was created. And I think that that's really important. So let's look at a little bit, let's go backwards a little bit, Ken, and see what this guy looked like. So when you see this image, completely different, a transformation in the opposite direction, kind of like what I did. Tell me a little bit about this guy with his glass of wine.
It's tough. It's a tough look. It's a tough watch. I would have been about 4:30 or 4:30 there. I was running the bars. I definitely would have been, you know, I would have been drinking. I was not. I was a moderate drinker. I was never a big drinker. I'm not. I'm not. Although I now haven't drunk for 9.5 years, I chose to stop because of the empty calories or empty sugars, and I just never went back. I don't. I don't actually. I don't know whether I enjoy it or not. I don't. I just find that, and the problem is, in some countries, in some cultures, in some friendships, some groups of friends, it's very difficult to be able to say no. I'll just take a sparkling mineral water, or I'll just take something, because it was, oh yeah, no, oh, Ken, he loves a pint, he loves he loves a beer. And it took a long time, and now I actually find that my friends, my social circle, they just know that I'm not going to be encouraged to do it, because it takes a bit of strength to do that. But once you actually break through that, you actually find it's fine. So what I see there is, I think about the drink, I think about my face, I see the how my eyes are smaller. Dr. Unwin talks about that. He says he can tell when somebody comes in by the size of their eyes. When you're really overweight, your eyes get a little more smaller and closed in. I see that in that version. And of course, you can't fail to see the apple shape, huge stomach. That would have been a size 60 waist, which I now 60-inch waist, which I now be 38, 40, depending on what trousers you're having. So, you know, it's that's what I see there.
Yeah, it's what an amazing image. Literally, you're holding your wine glass on your tummy like it's a table. I mean,
Yeah,
it's crazy. So I know
yeah,
one thing. I remember a motivational speaker who once said, in order to I guess he said the old you has to get out of the way in order for the new you to appear. And I think as I had the same issue with alcohol in college, in that I wasn't a big drinker, but there was a lot of pressure. And so I actually had to go and get some Coke in a glass and act as if it was some type of drink, just to not hear my friends say, "Get a drink, get a drink." You want to, have a drink, and it was just so I had to do that to kind of push it away. But it's even better to do what you've done, which is to have a friend who understands this is my new me. I got rid of the old me, and this is the new me. And by the way, I've had family members who thought that they were not funny. They thought that, they weren't fun to be around unless they had a drink. And we did a little experiment with this family member, and they were sober at a party. And lo and behold, they were still the same person. The alcohol was somehow a crux or something. It was something that made them maybe feel more relaxed, but they were still a funny person. So you may find that we don't need the alcohol. And of course, for those who tolerate it, enjoy. But for those who struggle with it, it's a lot of empty calories in alcohol, and it may be a trigger. And if it's a trigger for you, it's probably not a good idea. So this guy, I mean, even uh, as I look at this image, it looks like you're short of breath or out of breath just to take the picture.
Yeah,
So
I'd
tell
done
me about
about
this.
2 miles on that bike at that stage, and I was completely shot. But what I take from that is that this was the first, within the first couple of weeks of starting the journey. So
Yeah.
even the fact that I owned a bike and that I rode it is encouraging in this. This isn't a sad picture. It's very difficult to look at when you see the big stomach and the big trousers, and they're all 5XL. And I've still got that bike, and I treasure that bike. It's not an expensive bike, but it's stayed with me through the whole journey. And in fact, next year I'm intending to use that bike for, if we get out of lockdown and been able to do it. About 3 years ago, I was able to, 2 years ago, I was able to do a fairly long 70, 80 mile cycle. But one of the big events in our region is a 120-mile cycle, and I'm intending to use that bike to complete it, because it would create the full circle of being able to do that. But at that time I was 450, maybe, I could have even been more, but I always declare at 450 because I think that's probably the only thing I have with a slip of paper with it on from a hospital visit. So yeah, that's what I see there. I see the beginnings of the beginning of where I went the first time. That's what I
Wow.
see there.
Well, it's that's the last slide I wanted to share with you guys, and I'm gonna stop sharing my screen so we can continue our conversation. I do want to say that that was amazing, inspirational, and somewhat mind-boggling. And you're right. That's why I'm glad you spoke to the slides, because when I saw the image on the bike, I was not thinking in the terms of, wow, here's the new beginning for you. And I just really enjoyed seeing that. And I just think that's awesome, Ken. I mean, I hope that
Thank you.
whoever gets a chance to see this video shares it with anybody who is struggling, just to let them know that yes, you will be a different person, but you can transform. When it comes to your life as a whole, it sounds like you have benefited not just physically, but emotionally. Could you speak a little bit about
Yeah,
some of the emotional impact that being 210 pounds lighter has impacted on your life?
I think the big thing is the mental clarity, the appreciation of time and space, and strangely, it's interesting. Even during this lockdown period, I don't seem to get as anxious. I don't seem to get so concerned. I seem to be on more of a level keel all the way through, rather than these highs and lows, which I'm sure is. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a doctor, but they've got to be linked to the sugar. In that, you don't. I don't, because I don't have sugar rushes and then sugar dips. I kind of
Nice and
surf
level.
on it, if that's a.
I think that's it. And even when you have a family, and it's, they've done studies that show that we have kind of a threshold, right? And so if you start off, you look at a few emails and there's something going on that's stressful, you're going up the threshold of when you'll explode. And then you get to work and maybe some things are not right. You're going up here. So by the time you get here, um, and you need to go home, right? It doesn't take much to go over. And so you go home, you've been stressed, and then your wife has to, maybe she says something the wrong way, or the kids say something, and then you're over here, and then you explode. And, but if you can remain level the whole time, because you're not dealing with the things you can control, which is what you put in your mouth, um, it's a game changer, and it's affected. So when I go to work, I'm one of those happy-go-lucky docs, and I try to lift people up because I feel like lifting people up.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not focused on what my body's not doing right. So I'm really happy that you spoke to that aspect of it, because it affects every part of your life, and that's why I wanted to ask that question. Were there, I think we spoke about this a little bit, but I wanted to revisit this idea of medical conditions. Could you just briefly speak about some of the medical conditions that get better?
Sure. So I would have been years ago. I would have been in, at the time they called it, I think in the UK anyway, they called it Syndrome X, which was effectively pre-diabetes, for want of a better term.
Yeah.
But I didn't really, and I've spoken about this before. I never reached out. I was never offered any help. I never understood it. Nobody said, they just said, look, just eat less and move more, and you'll be great. You'll be fine. But they never really. But they did put me on metformin. They put me on a statin, and a blood pressure drug. So all of that stuff, which by the way, I don't have any of those now. I've been deprescribed, and I actually said, I know that in your world, and there's a lot of talk about deprescribing now, but my doctor, he rarely sees a deprescribed. I asked him actually, how many people aged in their mid-50s do you actually take off drugs? And he said, well, not many or any, which is an achievement in itself. I'm not advocating that. I absolutely did that with the blessing of my doctor. I think it's really important to say that. Although I've had many doctors over the years who wouldn't understand the whole low carb thing, I've always said to them, and even when we deprescribed, I said, look, at any time, I'm happy to take another lipid panel, and we'll make a call on that. So I wasn't saying I know better than you. I was saying I'm prepared to give this a go. I think I think I'm in the right place to do that, and that we'll do a lipid panel, and then we'll do another one in 6 months' time, and we can look at it. And if I'm right, then we're fine. But I would never say to people, just stop taking. It just doesn't. It's not what I'm about. I much prefer to go to my doctor and say, look, let's talk about this. Some people aren't as lucky as me that have got a doctor who's open to it, and that's difficult. But luckily, there are doctors more who are prepared to have that discussion.
Well, if I were to, we always should say this is medical information, and we're asking everybody to talk to their doctor. But one medical advice I would give everybody listening is that you are a customer first. So unless you live in an environment where you don't have any options, you do have the option to have a doctor or advanced practice clinician, nurse practitioner, etc., who is a partner. So when you are asking to be in a partnership, they hopefully will also understand it's a little give and take. So you just want somebody, you're not telling them what to do. You're just saying, I need some coaching because you have expertise. But if I decide to do a little bit of an experiment, would you walk with me to keep me safe? I may have to adjust my medicines during this process. Would you be willing to do that? And I think that's what you're looking for. You don't have to necessarily convince them that keto or low carb is safe, But what you do want is a clinician who will walk with you, and that's really a beautiful thing. And thank you for mentioning deep prescribing, because I too was one of those doctors who was trained in a way that medicines were the secret to everything. So uh, in my career, I probably took less than 5 people off medicines the first 17, 18 years of my career. And it's a weekly event now, maybe even more than that. And I'm not just talking about pills, I'm talking about insulin. So once you start to focus on lifestyle, it becomes possible, but it needs to be done with care. In fact, Dr. Eric Westman, who we're both familiar with, would say a person who does keto in his clinic and their sugars are, 200 or less, they automatically get their dose cut in half that day, which is an amazing thing. So I have to do some similar things when people I know they're engaged and they're going to do this. So that's really wonderful. A couple of things that I wanted to just speak to really quickly. What is your typical day like when it comes to your diet? So I know as we were getting started, you mentioned that you fast. Talk a little bit about intermittent fasting and talking about.
Yeah.
I just want to know what a typical day for Ken is like.
Okay. Typical day for Ken is I usually get up at 7. Um, I walk my dogs. They may have made a guest appearance in the background. The mailman is close by, but they're. So I get up. I do an hour's walk. It's probably about 3 or 4 miles. Um, I walk. I walk them. I come back. I have a cup of coffee. Um, and I would then set about going to work. And I work from home at the minute due to the pandemic. But so I would then really only take black coffee and water, sometimes some green tea. Um, but that would be all then until depending on how I feel. Four o'clock in the afternoon, maybe 5 o'clock in the afternoon. If I'm really busy and haven't had the time and didn't really need it, it may even be 6 o'clock before I have something to eat. And usually I'm a kind of, in a strange way, I'm a one meal a day man. But it's what I do is I break it over 3 courses. So effectively, I might start with some cold meat and maybe some cheese or something like that. Maybe just cold meats or something like that to start with. Then I might have steak and eggs with some broccoli or leeks, or so mix it up with some little bit of green veg. I did go carnivore for a while and I liked it, but I found I missed. Can you miss broccoli?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I did. I missed and I missed cauliflower and I missed leeks. So I just went back and I went, okay, well look, it was working. It's still working. That's fine. So um, and then I'd finish off with some cheese maybe, and that would see me through to maybe between 6 and 8 or 9 maybe, and I'd have had those three over that period. And then maybe I might have some olives, or if I'm hungry, if I'm watching the telly, or I might have a few handful of olives. I don't. I used to have nuts, but it kind of made me stall, so I stopped. Um, and then and that's it, and that's it. Then I've fasted from 9 o'clock in the evening to 6 the next day. Um, and then I have my and I sleep better. I
yeah.
feel better. It is hard. It's hard sell to people who don't do it, because
Right.
they think to themselves, "God, it's way too much." But as Jason Fung often says, you know, every religious order, every flavor of religion has some element of fasting in it for thousands of years. It's not dangerous, I feel, and not certainly in my circumstances. I speak for myself only, but I enjoy it. I enjoy the peace and the serenity. I don't know if that makes sense, but
Yeah.
there's something about not eating. And actually, and the other thing, and the other thing, which is really important, I had when the first time I felt hungry, I think that might have been 40 years more that I'd ever felt hungry, because I would be eating 6, 8 times a day,
Right.
snacks, rubbish, drink, chips, candy, whatever it was, I'd be eating. And so all of a sudden, I don't know, it just brings me a serenity, a peace. And I don't want to sound too hippie about it, but it just does.
Yeah. If
I
it
feel
wasn't,
different. I feel different.
yeah.
As we speak now, I'm probably still, I'm going to say 5 hours away from my first meal. I could, I just feel great. And I get that it's not for everybody. And when people hear you do it, and I don't shout about it because people it just freaks them out. So I just often I don't. And and sometimes but what I will say is I'm not freakish about it. So say for example, my wife and I wanted to go for lunch.
Right.
We'd go.
You just go.
Because food is more than fuel. It's actually social.
Right.
It's actually community. It's like when we used to sit around the campfire. That's what food is. It's also
Right.
It's been now big food have managed to make it a different thing altogether. But actually, the experience of breaking bread is the word we always use. And well, no, you and I wouldn't break bread,
Right.
but we may eat together.
That's
because, so it's important to not be, have a dogma about it. It's got
That's
to
right.
be when it suits. And if it doesn't suit, like Christmas, who's going to give up their Christmas dinner
Right.
or
Right.
their Thanksgiving lunch? Nobody's going to do that because I don't eat until 6 o'clock. That's stupid in my mind.
It's not practical.
No, it's
Yeah.
not. It's not fair on the family dynamic. I think I heard Ben Bittman say that he can't sit round and have his kids, and he's going to sit there and eat nothing. That's
you know what you remind me of my Dr. Eric Westman. He's very practical. You remind me of Amy Berger, and they both wrote that In Your Carb Confusion book, which I think will be out on December 15th or 16th. But one of the messages that Dr. Westman talked about is keep it simple. Amy Berger talks about, and let's be practical about this. Most people eat animal and vegetables that are not starchy. You really don't even have to count carbs, to be honest with you. I mean, for some people you do. I don't count carbs. I did in the beginning because I was trying to learn and understand it and figure out which things were bad and good. You get to a point where it's pretty obvious. My son makes a bok choy, and he just kills it. My oldest son, Brandon, he has his own podcast, Ritmos Negros, which is a great podcast he's doing about Latin American and African American culture and the connection. But I'm gonna tell you something. I'm like you. I do appreciate the carnivore community because I do think that for many of us that would work perfectly. And I think for some of us who still want to eat vegetables, and I'm still in that camp right now, we enjoy some of the vegetables, so we eat them. Now, when I eat meat most of the day, I never feel guilty because I understand that that's probably okay as well. And what most people don't understand, and I heard Dr. Jason Fung talk about this recently, not a lot of good science about any of these diets, to be honest with you. They push the low-fat diet, but all you have are epidemiological studies, which are only showing correlation. And when it comes to, really good, well-done studies, whenever they do that, what they find is that fat's not harming you. What they find is that grains are overrated and not benefiting you like we thought. Yeah. So people need to understand that. And I'll probably challenge my future guest, and I'll ask him, tell me your thoughts on grains, and I'll give him, it won't be a debate. It'll be more of let me hear your perspective. I'll share mine, and then I'll let the audience decide what's their best path. Because some people can eat grains and tolerate them just fine. I don't think a lot of diabetics would, but you never know. So if your body tolerates it, then great. So those are some very good talking points. I'm curious a little bit about when you first started, and when I saw you on your bicycle and you're in your beginning. Was the keto diet, did you get the keto, I call it the carb withdrawal, as opposed to the keto flu? Did you get any of that when you
Oh
started your
man,
journey?
yeah. Oh yeah. It's like, I've been a hardcore carb sugar guy for years. But do you know what? It's just a week. It's just a few days.
Right.
And I'm not going to say I can't butter it up anyway for you, Tony. It's tough,
Yeah.
but that's once you're through it, it's done. And as
Yeah.
long as and having done it twice now, once you've done it, and you don't need to go back. You don't need to. You don't want to go back through that again. And as I say, I was stupid enough to have to do it twice.
Right.
But I guess that's what So once you're through it, and it's hard because it's not only the sugar withdrawal. That's one thing, but it's the constant availability.
Right.
You walk into a store, there's candy, there's cookies, there's you go and get your coffee, and there's Danish pastries and croissants and all sorts of. And I remember I was in London probably a year or two ago, 18 months ago. I couldn't believe how many pastry shops there were now. Coffee and a pastry, and everybody's coffee and a pastry. And I'm like, can they not just have the coffee? You know, but even the coffee is probably a super duper uh, vanilla hazelnut thingy with all this
That's right.
syrup in it. I
Yeah.
just drink black
You
coffee.
guys have Starbucks there.
Yeah, oh
Uh,
yeah,
oh yeah, it's
but
like all over the
here,
world. Wow. Okay. Yeah, it's an expensive meal, but beyond that, you're right. If by the time they finish squeezing stuff in there, you're really it's like a snack all of a sudden. So I think you have to be careful. And I'm a big coffee guy too. I drink black coffee. I'll probably have, because again, it's a 6 hour difference. So it's 7 a.m. Chicago time, which means it's probably one. Yeah, there you go. Right. So, and I'll have one in the morning, and periodically I'll have one in the afternoon just because I may have a late meeting. And so, a couple of really quick questions as we kind of get close to wrapping up. Did you ever measure? I know we mentioned a little bit about the need to keep things simple. Did you ever measure ketones in your urine, or even, fat and protein and all of those macronutrients? Did you do any measuring
I
when
do.
you
In
started?
fact, I still do. I still do. I find it, for me, it works that I have a really good app on my phone that just allows me to log. I don't need to anymore. It's like you say, I really
You
don't
kind of
need to, but
know.
I think I just use it to. I certainly found early on that it was really handy to write down, because you tend to forget what you've eaten,
Right.
and having a little something on the side, you forget it. So I still write down, and again, I don't think I need to do it, but it's kind of my comfort blanket.
That's fair.
Um, but to be honest, one of the best things I bought was a body composition scale. Um, I mean, it's cheap enough. It was $25. It's
Hmm.
I don't know. As I said to somebody, look, it may be, if it I don't know how accurate it is. It's pretty accurate on the weight, what it does with the other stuff, but at least once you're using something. And what I suppose I learned from that, which is really important, is that weight, as you kind of implied earlier, weight and BMI are a pretty blunt instrument.
Right.
I mean, according to my body scale, I've got I can't convert it in my head, but it's let's say I'd say it's 180, 170 odd pounds of my weight is muscle, because I used to play sports, and
Right.
I've kept that. So even if I wanted to get below 170, I couldn't,
You just
because it's
couldn't.
all
Yeah.
muscle. why would I want to lose muscle?
You
That's
just don't.
so, body fat's the big important thing to me anyway. Body fat, BMI, basal metabolic rate, kind of like, I don't really count calories either. I don't care. I don't care, and I sometimes run into calorie guys on Twitter, and I just, like a Jason Fung said it, calories, who cares,
Yeah, it doesn't matter as much. It just doesn't. Yeah.
because 100 grams of broccoli does not do the same thing as 100 grams of cookies.
It just doesn't. And I think any person who's being logical about this will understand that simple example you just gave. Metabolically, your body handles things differently, and that's just how the body works. So I think it's important. So that helps a little bit to frame things a little bit. And that's why I wanted to ask you that question. I do appreciate you saying that, for some people, you really want to measure because you do want to understand. You have a lot of education to acquire. We're still learning. And when you're in the beginning of this journey, and you haven't made your transformation yet, you need to know what to do. And so you need to identify that, Raisin Bran has 38 carbs. Probably not a good way to start your day with 38 carbs from a cereal. So, and then you'll learn that most cereal in general are probably not a good idea. So I think that that's why it's important. The last comment I want you to talk about is did you struggle with any weight loss stalls? And you had to do something different to get you going, so tell me a little bit about any of that.
Yeah, I think I called it out there, like nuts, for example.
Yeah.
Or other cheese. I mean, I love cheese. The bluer, the more French, kind of Italian, sort of smelly, the better. But you have to be careful. Although it's low carb, I just know that if I have too much, I know it doesn't feel right for me.
Right.
And I see the store, and I mean, look, and this is something that you have to face up to as well. The nearer you are to your goal, the more work it takes.
Right.
It takes more work. You've done the easy yards are the ones post the sugar. Once the sugar's out of your system and you've fat adapted, the next, I don't know, 18 months, that's real good territory if you can keep but what happens is, as you get nearer and nearer your goal, it becomes tougher and tougher and tougher.
Yeah.
And but actually I learned this from one of your colleagues, Tro. Like, just trust the science.
Yeah.
I don't take carbs, I don't take sugar, my insulin is under control, so it's happening. It's not just about the weight, it's about everything else. It's about controlling, making me more insulin sensitive, making sure that my pancreas works. And in fact, I think it might have been Ted Naiman actually that I think it was him actually that encouraged me back onto a little bit of carbohydrate, just enough to make sure that you stay insulin sensitive. Now, I don't want to go down a rabbit hole or head in the weeds here. But I do think there is some benefit to just, and I wouldn't have said that 18 months ago. 18 months ago, I'd have been hardcore, no carb, nothing, just, Sean Baker style. But now I'm like, okay, I can bring in broccoli or leek or cauliflower, and it hasn't made any difference.
It just hasn't, right? Yeah.
So
if
I can do it and it doesn't put on, that's a tick in the win column.
Yeah, you're doing a nice experiment, and it's allowing you to see what works. But again, I think the big message today, guys, is that understand the principles, start to follow them, but don't get too. You still got a life to live. You still got things to do that may put you in a slightly different direction, as long as you have the motivation to stay on track. So we'll wrap it up. We're at the hour. Really appreciate you coming back. And I guess as we wrap up, two things. Any final thoughts? And of course, please share your Twitter handle so that people know how to find you on Twitter. So any final thoughts?
just look, guys, it's a tough start. Some of you will be somewhere on your journey, and I think one of the things that I really want to stress is it is your own journey. Your journey isn't my journey. It's different. You're culturally, environmentally, where you live, where you eat, how your day goes. It's all different. So you have to find your own way. It's unique to you. There are some really good rules of engagement. You know, cut your sugars, cut your carbs, cut your alcohol, cut your starches. But actually, there's, you know, within that, there's a lot of nuance. So I'd say, you know, and the other thing I'd say is don't beat yourself up. If you have a bad day, have a bad day. Wipe the slate clean tomorrow and go again. So I definitely say those are the two most important things, and live your life as you say. It's really, really important. You know?
That's right.
Be
We're
happy.
definitely here.
Be
We're
happy.
definitely here to live that life. And we're about on Twitter. Where can we find you on Twitter?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, Kilorglin Ken at KIGGLIN Ken, and you can see it there. But if you click on any of Dr. Tony's posts, you'll probably find me there.
That's right. We definitely
share or a like, or you know.
That's right.
Because he's been really inspirational. You're very lucky. You guys in the Wisconsin and Chicago area, you're really lucky. He's a good guy, and he taught me a lot about. If I might say, I don't want to embarrass you now, but he taught me a lot about how life might be for some of the less fortunate in his community, and how those influences are different. And I can't tell you how influential that's been on me in the sense of how guys who are not like me live on the south side of Chicago.
That's right.
I don't get that. I don't even know what that's like. So for me, it's taught me to think differently about other people's circumstances, which
That's
are not
right.
as lucky as mine.
Well, thank God for technology, and maybe one day we will break bread, rather it's here or in Ireland. I do like to travel, so once we're able to travel more, I'll definitely be doing that, and we'll see each other once we get our low carb conferences started up again. I'll probably have a reunion of faces and people that we both admire and respect. So I really look forward to that. So those who are listening to this YouTube video, I thank you for spending some time with us today. And again, we did a retake because we had a little bit more of audio trouble with the last recording. This was a little bit better, and hopefully it'll be at a level where everybody could enjoy it. So whether you're just starting your transformation or have already started, I hope Ken's story helped you. I listened to Ken say that on his bike, he's planning to do 120 miles. I mean, imagine being a guy who could barely walk a half a block and now doing 120 miles on a bicycle. What a wonderful goal. If you've never been told that you can get off medication, well, Ken just told you it's possible. Work with some people who will hold your hand and help you on your journey. So deprescribing is a thing that can happen. And if you've never fasted, one of the things I always tell people, maybe try keto first and then fast because it's easier that way. But either way, fasting has become, I think, for both of us, one of the most transformational things we've ever experienced. So I really appreciate everybody. Again, if you want more of Ken, podcast episode number 20 will be in your podcast app as of Friday the 13th. And you'll get a chance to check that out, get a little bit more of Ken. And we had a great conversation that was over an hour. So we spent 2 hours together, Ken. I feel like I really know you much more now. And thank you again for that. And for those listening, be well. And as I always say, continue to protect your nest. Take care, guys.